So first, let me give an introduction to UL for those who may not know. I think it's a company that in America is very well known. It's a 120-year-old company that was involved with the onset of the electrical infrastructure. When the environment of electricity was built in the United States, the insurance industry of America said, we're not going to certify buildings unless the buildings have a way to check for the if the building is going to have electricity in it. We're not going to insure it unless someone has taken a look at it. So the starting of the company, the name Underwriters Laboratories, was basically the laboratory for the underwriter, the insurance person. And over time, the company evolved into a safety science company where we focused on evaluating, understanding technologies, while learning technologies, helping to develop standards so that the right kind of requirements could be done and manufacturers can show that their designs met a level of safety and a level of due diligence. And because of that level of due diligence, someone who's procuring or a government regulator can say that that design is safe to be used within residences or within a workplace. So nowadays with energy storage, you have to look at it from a perspective of where does it make sense, and the areas that obviously come to mind immediately is utility level when it comes to the renewable projects, and specifically for India, when you think about the projections that are there, right? The 60 gigawatts for wind, the 100 gigawatts for solar, the announcements from the government that they're going to try to achieve that there's going to be a lot of independence issues and a lot of reliability issues unless storage is there to back up those type of systems. So I think for a lot of considerations that are there for the way the grid gets better is when a renewable has a storage solution connected to it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be at utility level. It can be considered at other levels. But when those solutions start to move and migrate closer and closer to populations, like Ajoy was saying that they have some space constraints in the city of Mumbai, when you get closer and closer to populations, you really have to think through the safety criteria of the type of products that you're bringing closer and closer to people. I'll give you one example of a situation we're seeing in the United States. New York City has been in discussion with the utility in New York, Con Edison, to install large quantities, megawatt hours of energy storage in the high-rise buildings of New York City in downtown Manhattan. And the idea is that you take the empty floors of a building, put the megawatt hour energy storage in the building, and now you can shut down nuclear power plants or other kinds of power plants that are within the vicinity of the New York area. And instead of having more power plants, you use the power plant more efficiently and you charge up your battery in the evening, and then Con Edison can deploy that during peak times in the summer months, peak times when morning and evening, and really just make better use of what they already have as power production. The challenge that they faced was that the fire department of New York and the New York Department of Building said, well, wait a minute, if you're going to put that much battery quantity or energy storage quantity in a building, what kind of due diligence, what type of fire propagation hazard have you checked for? And at the time, 3 years ago, no one had really defined that. No one had come up with a test methodology to look at that. And that's kind of work that UL gets involved in. This is a problem. There's manufacturers who want to get their product into the industry or into the city. There is a government, the state government of New York, that's saying that there's a mandate. And then you have the utility trying to also move things forward, and then the authorities having jurisdiction saying there's going to be a problem if we don't do this right. So with a lot of work that's been put in many years of many different people at UL, we're at the point now that we have a test methodology that is acceptable by the fire department in New York, is going to be done on many manufacturers' designs, some of whom were mentioned in the room. Due to non-disclosures, I cannot mention them. But once those designs show compliance, they will be able to show those kind of reports to authorities, and then it becomes an accepted design that would be allowed in the city of New York. So similarly, when you're thinking about this in the context of India, population density is very high here. Many places where storage could be maybe outlined as a potential location, if it's near mixed occupancy or near people, considerations of the fire propagation hazard is a pretty significant one. Rahul, you mentioned about the growing from 500 kilowatt hours, now up to 9.3 megawatt hours. That is a lot of fuel. You have to think of this in terms of fuel. And if the fuel is ignited incorrectly, I mean, it's a battery, its purpose is not to be fuel, but if it does ignite, it is catastrophic. And I'm saying that from someone who has seen some of these tests because we run them in our Northbrook fire facility. It almost burned down a fire lab. So we were only testing up to 250 kilowatt hour. So one single rack unit. And the designs that are out there that are pushing well beyond megawatt hours, when they're out in the in utility restricted spaces where no human beings really walking on a regular basis, or if they are trained people, it becomes a much different situation. But once it becomes a commercial opportunity or a commercial building or a residential building, some deep thought has to go into looking at designs and standardization and all of that. So UL plays a big role in this one, and not only in the electrochemical world of batteries, but in the flow technology, the mechanical flywheel technology, and other technologies that have had hazards associated with them. In the presentation deck that I was going to show, I had images of some of the more recent events that have happened and the images of what the fires look like. I'll give you a list of a few that are kind of on top of my head. Mitsubishi Materials Corp. In 2011, they had a sodium sulfur fire. It cost 9.2 billion yen. I don't know exactly what that is in US off the top of my head, or an Indian rupee. But that was a major loss, and it caused a lot of questions about how the design was validated, how the installation was done. In 2012 was Kahuku Wind Farm. I think most people remember the Hawaii incident where it was actually lead acid batteries, and it was a 15 megawatt hour facility. The whole facility, it was a utility scale facility. It burned down. The wind turbines were stopped. They stopped using the turbines for months, so that's a loss of the asset for a period of time. And eventually they rebuilt that facility, or rebuilt parts to get the wind turbines working. 2013 and 14, there was Arizona had in the state of Arizona in the United States, there was a smaller system, a 1.5 megawatt hour system in one of the counties that caught on fire while it was being deployed. So it hadn't even been used yet, and it was already catching on fire. And then there was a system in a shopping mall that it was a commercial system, 50 kilowatt hour system for the shopping mall, and that caught on fire. And they have the videos of the firefighters trying to fight that fire. Then there was the 2016 in Australia. There was a fire in a person's home, and it was the design had never been tested. No third party was involved to make sure that requirements were being met. And luckily the man had it on a brick wall in a garage that was outside of the house. But if that had been connected to a wall that was a flammable material, the scorch marks that were left on that home, it's very clear that the fire caused a lot of damage. And then there was even a major U.S. corporation, their battery facility that they were producing caught on fire, and that's not the only one. There's more than one in China that has happened, and one that happened in Germany as well, that the facilities that are producing are having a hard time sometimes maintaining and managing what they're dealing with. And so these are all just important when it comes to thinking about selection of batteries and selection of energy storage. Now, when designs are made right, and there are plenty of examples of where that happens, there's plenty of examples of people who have done their due diligence and get test reports from third parties like UL. Then it's very clear. It becomes very clear who the standouts are. I think in the earlier moderator, the other gentleman also named Rahul, he did a nice comment that he said that you have three things. You have cheaper, better, and what was I think faster, right? So you got to choose two, right? So if you want better, which means that you're looking to make sure that the product is a safer one, so in our context, better means safer, then it's going to take a little bit more homework to get there. It can be done. But that's also something conceptually, I think, in India, I'm learning on my trip here, that's important to get across to those that may be looking at solutions. And it's also important to choose partners that would understand these technologies, understand where their operating parameters exist, knows how to work with manufacturers, system integrators, and developers to make sure that things are thought through throughout the entire systems design. And that's kind of why I'm here, because UL is involved in this kind of work, and we're trying to advise now to the utility level companies to say, as you plan for India as you start to build this up, we're thrilled. UL operates in India for 20 years. We're a dedicated company for the success in India. We just want to see that the technology go through its right validation, and so it doesn't set anyone back or set future technology back because of a major incident.
So I'd probably get in trouble for this comment, but I guess all the three parameters you have said for optimization, I think Indian government thinks they have found a solution, which is the reverse auction. Yeah. So, but in terms of, you gave actually number of different examples, so that was actually very important that you highlighted that some of these issues are not technology specific, but even across technologies these have happened, and probably you excluded two of the well-known things which are more on the consumer side, which was, I guess, back in the early 2000s, I guess the Sony laptops, they first brought the attention, and most recently the Samsung phones.
Samsung phone and the Boeing 787.
Yeah, Boeing 787. So yeah, there are a number of things where this is very critical. But just one immediate follow-up question to that is because there are certain different things which are at electrochemistry level where certain chemistries are, say, safer than other chemistries, right? So when UL is working on these standards or the thing, is it typically the approach at a system level, or are there differentiations at a sub-chemistry level where different standards or different rules will apply to different technologies? If you can just highlight that.
So I think there's a beautiful quote from the founder of UL. His name was William Henry Merrill, and he says, "Know by test." Know by test, and that's his way of saying that you must have data to substantiate a claim that a technology is safer. And typically, certain parameters for electrochemical technologies, they're relatively the same in the sense of what you would expect if an electrical abnormality was to happen, or a mechanical abuse was to happen, or an environmental abuse. So those are kind of the three main areas where standards will define very specific tests to see if the electrical abuse condition occurs, mechanical abuse condition occurs, or an environmental condition occurs. How does the cell level product maintain itself in a safe state? And then when it becomes a module, how does the module maintain safe? And then, of course, when it becomes a full battery pack or a full energy storage system. So when you do the system level approach, yes, there's some considerations at the lower elements and the component level systems. And then if it's a totally kind of set up as a different technology, standards typically have another way to look at it. For example, flow batteries. This is a much more liquid and pump and chemical related battery, not an electrochemical battery. So there's some requirements that are specific to that kind of technology. In general, though, the main system level at the end, when you make a full energy storage system, you're going to expect that at a full system level that they react similarly in their safety behavior. And as long as the component level things that build up to the system level have had their proper evaluation with the known requirements, then things go pretty smooth.